David Johns. I'm a business lawyer here in Flagstaff at AWD Law. My background is in particular intellectual property law, and I'm joined today with one of our associates.
Hello, I'm Morgan Bauer. I'm an associate attorney at Aspie, Watkins & Diesel. I primarily practice business law with David.
We have a great set of panelists today. This is going to be a loose question and answer, and if we have time, we encourage people to raise their hands or shout out questions if you have any. But here's a panel of experienced entrepreneurs at different levels of the entrepreneurial experience. I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves.
So I'm Jim Corning. I have Nova Kinetics and Kinetic Defense in Flagstaff. 30 years ago, just about, I started this manufacturing business in my garage. We make parts for aircraft, carbon fiber, fiberglass, bullet-resistant panels, and seats. And we now employ 40 people in Flagstaff.
I'm Ashley Haida with Analytical Mindset. We do AI and analytics for the mining industry. We have been around since 2014. We're currently self-funded, and I met one of our first client at the first industry conference I went to on the second night at a bar. So that tells you kind of a bit about me and how I do business. And thank you, David, for having me.
Hi everyone, I'm Nathan Friedman. I am the CEO of HemaSense. You'll hear a little more about the company here in a little while because I'll be pitching after this as well. But we are a medical device startup based here in Flagstaff as well as down in Phoenix. My background is primarily in engineering, and I spent 19 years at W.L. Gore & Associates doing medical device design and development, and also founded, ran, and then eventually sold Wanderlust Brewing Company here in Flagstaff. So I've been an entrepreneur in a couple different situations over the years.
Okay, hi, I'm Jessalyn Armstrong, and I want my students to say hi to me. Hey, NAU Venture Studio! So I came here a couple of years ago from the East Coast. I was in an accelerator for a medical device company. Decided I was done with the hustle and bustle when I live in the forest. And met David Johns. I was about to leave my company and abandon our patent. And he said, maybe you shouldn't do that. And then we recalibrated, long story. I'm now the director of operations for Venture Studio at NAU. And I get to help students all day long solve really big problems and try to tackle the solutions that we all want to live for.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to start because there are two lawyers up here with disclaimers. These are not we are not giving legal advice, and these are the thoughts and musings of the presenters. They are not the position of Lowell Observatory, Moonshot, NAU, Arizona Commerce Authority, Aspie, Watkins & Diesel, or anybody else. So if you have an issue with anything we're saying, take it up with us personally. So we have a series of 4 questions. We're going to ask the panelists to chime in on it, and I'll let Morgan take it from here.
Okay, first question for the panelists. What do you wish you knew before you started? And what would you have done differently had you known?
So what I wish I had known or had known better when I started out was the importance of building a really good team. I think many of us come to the business of starting a business with a skill set, like we're nerdy engineers, or an idea or a concept or something that we want to qualify and sell. And that's important. But once you start down this road, you have to build an organization. And some of my early co-founder types were hardworking, smart people that were interested in what we were doing. But it took a lot of years to really get a team that runs the company smoothly and that plays well together. So that was one of my learnings.
Let's talk about trauma. I'm just kidding. David knows my story. When I was in Florida, I got started a group with some engineers that were senior engineers spanning across NASA, telco, biomedical. And one of the mistakes that I made, and I'm speaking to my students up here and anybody else that is thinking that they don't know enough and they don't think that they are smart enough to be in the room, I let these senior men convince me that 20 years of clinical experience was not good enough to have input on how our medical device was going to be designed. I let them convince me that we needed an LLC to house our patent, which if anybody knows what happens when you incorporate and create a company, you're marrying these people. And I definitely did not need them as spouses. And I also let them convince me that they had done their due diligence and picked out a patent lawyer that was out of Florida that was highly recommended, only for that lawyer to take our money, pretend that he had filed our patent appropriately, not pay the fees, and then have our patent abandoned. Enter David Johns, and then we had to resurrect it. So my big lesson was, you probably do know more than you think in your industry. And if you are the expert that's sitting in that seat and you've lived that and that's your experience, you absolutely have say-so in how you're going to solve that problem.
That was great.
Yeah, thank you, Jim and Jesslyn. Should I move us on to the second question, or did anyone want to hop on the first one? Okay, sounds good. Okay, question number 2. What is the best business advice you have received? And what is the best advice you can offer the entrepreneurs in the audience today?
Anyone can call anyone. And I mean that literally. You might think that somebody is unavailable, or you might let people make you think that you are not an important voice in the room, but nobody is so inaccessible that you can't pick up the phone and call them. And I have a brief story about burritos that I'd like to share. So I stay outside Tucson, Arizona, and there was a mining company coming in to host an event last spring. I got an invite to the event because of some work I did at a previous conference, so I thought I would invite a colleague who isn't a competitor but lives nearby and does some similar AI analytics work. And then I didn't hear from him, so I thought, oh, that's strange. But then I went to the event, and I show up in this room where all these men were just chummy with each other. And I said, what did I miss? How did he already get an introduction to these people who are from out of town, who've never been here before? And then later I find out that he called them up, my peer called them up, ignored my email, and asked them to breakfast burritos that morning. And they said those were the best breakfast burritos they've had in their entire lives. So, and they did not go to a very good breakfast burrito place, I will add. But at the end of the day, by the end of dinner, my peer had had a contract with them drafted and signed, and I left with a very different situation. I was no longer a founder of an AI company in the room. I have an absurd amount of education for what I do. I think I was the most educated one in the room, which made me feel so strange being pushed out. But you had 2 founders who didn't know these companies, who had little to no introduction with them, and left with very different outcomes. So pick up the phone and call people and make those introductions that you want to make, because nobody is so busy that they don't have time to go for breakfast burritos with you. And if they're from out of town, they won't know what the good breakfast burritos are.
Yeah, so I'm going to build off of that a little bit in this idea of kind of getting out of your comfort zone and getting out of the 4 walls that you're building in. I think one of the most important things you can do as an innovator and an entrepreneur is get out of the building and talk to your customers, potential customers, future customers, people that might have an interest in your business. Because ultimately, you're building a business, and you need to know what your customers or your future customers value and what they're willing to pay for. If you don't have an idea of what that is and what their pain points are and what they would value in what you're building, you're running a charity. You're not running a business, because no one's going to pay you for your services or your goods. And we laugh at that, but at the same time, a lot of people, myself included, will get obsessed with an idea and think, well, all I have to do is build it and it's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread and people are going to beat down my door. That is not true. You need to understand what motivates your customers to buy. And I know we're probably going to talk about this in a few minutes, but I'll give you a little hint to it. If you are looking for investment, investors are customers as well, and you need to understand what motivates them.
This was sort of indirect advice, and it wasn't given to me personally, but many of you probably have heard of Tony Robbins and the big events that he does. And I've been to his Business Mastery event, which it's quite the experience, I'll say. And I think Tony is a genius in terms of psychology and helping us get to understand what it's going to feel like when we have taken massive action and succeeded at something and made it across the goal line. But one of the things that he said in one of those sessions that really stuck with me was, don't fall in love with your product, which again is a weakness for us nerdy engineers. Fall in love with your customer, and to build on what Nathan said, you got to get to know those guys and you got to understand what they want, because ultimately what makes a sustainable business is customer relationships and customers that pay. We all chuckled when Nathan said the word charity, but believe me, I have worked on projects that did not pay, and charity is no darn fun. It was a rueful laugh.
Okay. Are there any common wisdoms for entrepreneurs that you would like to challenge?
Well, at the risk of talking too much, I think one of them, you read books about how to start a business, they mostly concentrate on writing a killer business plan and getting funded and going shooting for the moon after that. And 30 years ago, I wrote several business plans and was never able to even so much as get an SBA loan out of it. So we basically bootstrapped the business off of my engineering consulting practice. And I think I did consulting for maybe the first 10 years or so in order to make payroll and make things work. But again, it kind of circles back to the idea that if you don't have funding, you need to get to know your customers really soon and really well. And that's a crucial thing to focus on.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Figuring out where they show up, where your customers show up, has been essential for us. Traditional marketing routes have not proved worth our time or our money, but LinkedIn, wow, who would have thought LinkedIn is the next hot thing for the mining industry? That's unfortunate. But if we promote there, we see a great return on our investment for marketing, as well as showing up at these conferences and just getting out of the house, shaking hands.
Maybe I'll build on the funding piece just a little bit. So HemaSense, my business, is a investor-backed company. We have angel investors, and we're raising a seed round with institutional investors right now. And I think all of us who are in this kind of startup world see all the headlines about this and such company raised this much money, they have these investors, they're worth this much valuation. Something that I always tell people is before you march down that pathway, you need to understand if your business is actually suited for that kind of funding. There are actually relatively few business areas where that makes a lot of sense, because you need to find the right funding to get you to that next milestone. And if you're looking at an investor, or you're looking at a venture capital group, they are looking for a return on that investment. And if you're not building a company in a sector with a business that can eventually give them that return, that's not the right funding structure, and you're going to feel like you are under a lot of pressure that you can't live up to. There are a lot of other ways, including bootstrapping businesses, including SBA loans, including grant funding, that by and large are probably better approaches for a lot of different business models. So don't rule that out, and don't get caught up in the headlines of these funding rounds and this valuation and these exits and all that kind of stuff. You have to be aware of that, because you have to understand what the rules of the game are that you're going to play by if you're going to get into that world. But at the same time, I always encourage everybody to try and exhaust all of those other options first, and make sure that you know what your funding strategy is and how it aligns to what your business is going to look like in the future, or what you think it's going to look like in the future.
All right, final thought. You guys covered it all. You can't do it all. That's a lie. As an entrepreneur, you're not supposed to wear 50 hats at once. You cannot do it well. You need a team. You need a support group. You probably need therapy. You're gonna need family and friends that can hold you. You need people to take you out to the bar, to drag you out of the house. Yeah, burritos, take a shower, remind yourself that you're human when you've been glued and locked in. So you really can't do it all. And the people that you surround yourself with will probably determine how well you feel about yourself and how well you do. You do need those cheerleaders. You need those people that have got your back. They're gonna answer the phone. They're gonna sit around and share the war stories, who have been there and done that. Don't be a silo. You cannot do it on your own and do it well.
Those are all very insightful comments. David, will you share your common wisdom that you'd like to challenge with us?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll share it to make my life easier then. So previously, David had brought up, there's this misconception that, if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking at starting a company, you have to be a corporation instead of an LLC. Definitely not true. It really depends on your individual circumstances. And then there's this big desire to be in Delaware. The Delaware rules are really hard for David and I to understand. So if we could move to Arizona rules, that would be appreciated.
I'll comment on that. Yeah, and this ties into the next topic, actually. There are some significant challenges in seeking out venture capital fund. We have a lot of people come to us and say, well, I need to be a corporation, I need to be a C Corp in Delaware. And if you're seeking venture capital fund, if you're the kind of business that requires venture capital funding, yeah, you probably do. But keep in mind, you don't have to be that right from the start. So you really need to consider all the things that the folks on the panel were talking about, what Nathan was talking about. Hey, what's your horizon on this? When do you need the venture funds? If you're starting a coffee shop, you're not getting venture funds. And maybe an LLC in Delaware is just, and in Arizona is just great. The hoops you have to go through to be a Delaware Corp are significantly higher than the hoops you have to go through in Arizona. Arizona is a very company-friendly state to start a business in. It's not a bad place to start. So I'm going to throw this out to the panel. Any insights with respect to venture capital funding? Some of you are seeking it, some of you are not. But thoughts?
I'll try not to talk at too much length about this question because I'm in the thick of this process right now. My earlier comment about making sure that you're well suited to that, and it's a type of business that really needs that, is absolutely critical at the early phases. In the medical device world, we run on timelines that are multiple years and in some cases up to a decade before we're going to see any sort of revenue. There are pathways to get funding through SBIR grants or through NIH grants or all of these different places that a lot of companies start with. But we knew that we needed to bring in investors because of the type of business we are, and we're well suited to that. We're shooting for a very large, very big exit multiple when that finally happens, and that's what you have to have and be able to say that with a straight face that that's going to happen. We spent probably close to $10,000 just to form the business entity because we needed to be a Delaware C Corp, because we knew from day one we were going to start taking investors. And we pay thousands of dollars every year to upkeep that entity. It is not cheap. The first year we were in business, I spent almost 30% of our overall budget on legal fees, and that includes patents, it includes the business filings and everything like that. So it's not cheap. But that being said, if you have that business plan, you need to think about what is going to attract an investor. I hinted at earlier, one of the best pieces of advice that I got early in this journey is, as a CEO of an investor-backed startup, I have two products. I have the product that we're actually selling, which is the HemaSense device, and then I have an investment, and I'm selling that investment to an investor. I'm not saying they don't care about what your product is, but what I'm saying is that they want to know why your product is going to shift a paradigm, and people are going to pay a lot of money to acquire that, or when you IPO or something like that. If you are not in that scenario, and you can't say that with a straight face, that you are going to return a multiple to those venture investors, they're not interested because it's not a good investment to them. They know that 9 out of 10 of their investments are going to go belly up. They need that one that's going to return a 10x, a 20x multiple on their investment to make it worth it. It's a very different world than starting a small business, and I did that, with Wanderlust Brewing Company. We didn't have any external investors. We bootstrapped the whole thing, and that was well suited to that business. So I'll stop there. I could talk at length about how this ecosystem works, and I'm happy to do that maybe over a beer at the Collider tonight if people want to talk about it then. But it is a world that you need to understand of what you're stepping into and what the kind of rules of the game are and why people get into that world when you do that.
I would build on what Nathan said about, some businesses this is a good fit and some businesses it's not. One of the things that I think somebody starting a business really needs to get clear on is, why are you doing it? What is it that this is going to bring to you? Some people start a business because they get tired of working for the man, and I'll admit that up into my 30s, I never managed to hold a job for more than 3 years, and I think that the average was probably closer to 2. And in many cases, my bosses were not sad to see me go either. But I've had a business for almost 30 years now. It'll be 30 in September. So, sometimes that's just a good fit. When I was starting out with this in Texas, I knew 2 guys who had built really large and successful businesses. One of them was Marvin Gearhart, who built an oilfield services business in the 60s that went on the New York Stock Exchange. And in the mid-80s, when the price of oil went down to $12 a barrel, if anybody can imagine such a thing, he lost control of the company in a hostile takeover, and he took his what reserves he had and bought a small company and didn't take on any partners and pretty much lived happily ever after. Another fellow, Leland Snow, built an aircraft company. They build, at this point, 200 crop dusters and forest firefighting airplanes a year. And his first attempt in the 60s also saddled him with investors, and being a rather strong-willed character, that didn't work very well for him. And so the next time around, he got an SBA loan for something like $250,000, and again, never took on investors. And so if you're a control freak, and some of us are and some of us are not, you need to get clear about that. So maybe I should stop there.
I have a feeling we've run out of time. Scott's nodding at me. But thank you to the panel. We really appreciate all of you being here and your insights. And thank all of you, and good luck in starting your businesses.